Florida Governor Ron DeSantis blocks mask mandates, while New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio enforces vaccine mandates. New York Attorney General finds undeniable corroboration in the sexual misconduct allegations made against Governor Andrew Cuomo, and Disney responds to Scarlett Johansson's lawsuit. I'm Nico Fideli, and this is For the Republic.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Ask not what your country can do for you.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Welcome back to For the Republic. If this is your first time here, thank you so much for checking out the show. Please give the video a thumbs up if you like the content, and consider subscribing to the channel. This week is jam-packed, so let's get right into it. I want to start off by talking about a phenomenon that has been plaguing our culture for quite some time now, and that is the cancel culture. Cancel culture has been hard at work over the last couple years, seemingly eradicating the world of anyone who has made a misstep. This strategy, inspired by the left, has been around before, but only recently, thanks to social media, has it become mainstream. It goes by many names and hides behind many movements. You have the Me Too hashtag movement, Black Lives Matter, the 1619 Project, COVID-19, just to name a few. In the beginning, cancel culture focused their efforts on eliminating conservative and Republican opinions. As cancel culture gained momentum, again thanks to the digital world, it began broadening its efforts to contradict anyone that doesn't agree with the far left viewpoint or who has made a questionable decision throughout their lives. We now see that no one is immune to the folly of cancel culture. People like Chris Pratt, Mike Lindell, Gina Carano, and more have been savaged by this movement, but it doesn't stop there. We've now witnessed this culture going after its own in the teardowns of Ellen DeGeneres, Chrissy Teigen, J.K. Rowling, and others. So the question now becomes, is there anything good about cancel culture? The short, blunt answer is no. In order to understand why, let's discuss how it works. Cancel culture operates by targeting someone, anyone who has a lifestyle contrary to the mainstream left, or who has done something they do not approve of. Let's take J.K. Rowling, for instance. A staunch advocate for just about anything left-wing, the author was hailed for years as an advocate of diversity and equality. That is until she revealed that she does not support people becoming transgender. She wrote an interesting piece discussing the personal experiences in her life that led to her beliefs. Was she received with open arms of acceptance and love? Of course not. Instead, she became the target of name-calling, boycotts, verbal attacks, slander of character, and even death threats. She is a prime example of why cancel culture has nothing good to offer. This movement is nothing short of a disease that is ravaging our society, taking victim after victim until someone stops it. One of the most dangerous aspects of cancel culture is that it has no moral compass. When a society, cause, or movement has no steady morality, it becomes subject to the shifting morality around it. As I've talked about before on this show, politics is downstream from culture, and culture is downstream from God, or an objective morality. When morality changes, or when God becomes less prevalent, it changes society. From entertainment to jokes, even language. Things become unacceptable that were once mainstream, while things completely incomprehensible become excused and even advocated for. In short, immorality becomes the new morality. The goalposts keep shifting, which consequently changes what is now acceptable. That's one of the reasons you see gay pride turning into, you're not gay enough. Or, if you have no interest in dating a transgender person, you're homophobic. If you believe that everyone can change the circumstances of their lives, you are a racist. And if you believe that men and women have different roles in the home and society, you're a sexist. It's not so much about what someone has actually done, but more about what is considered woke enough for the time. Chris Pratt goes to church, Mike Lindell is a Trump supporter, and Gina Carano is simply Republican. All things deemed not okay by the radical movement, who readied their arms and began swift takedowns of these, quote, tyrants, end quote. This is why cancel culture becomes so threatening, because has no concise moral basis, no consistent code of conduct, or even reliable expectations. Rather, it goes after anyone who does not suit its agenda of the day and has no dependability in doing so. Another perilous component of cancel culture is the weapons it uses to take down its victims. We've seen just about every tactic in the book, from manipulation to boycotts to threats of violence, lies, hate mail, calls for employment termination, death threats, and more. Nothing is off limits, and they will do anything they can to achieve their desired result. What is the desired result? It masks its reparations as a sincere apology, but once it has you trapped, it demands more. Admittance of complete ignorance, renouncing any individuality, and finally, the disappearance of said individual from society. Now, you may be asking yourself, is it possible to use cancel culture for good? Several conservative commentators, such as Candace Owens and Michael Knowles, have even endorsed this idea. However, the same problems that plague the current far-left cancel culture will follow into the right. It would continue to be a takedown of anyone not fitting the current agenda, but still suffer from the ever-changing morality. Suddenly, certain Republicans wouldn't be conservative enough, Christians would not be holy enough, and there would be no room for compromise. Therefore, I am a firm believer that cancel culture must stop. Now the question is, what will take its place? What will happen when someone does something truly wrong and should answer for it? Well, my answer is to use good old-fashioned capitalism. Ellen DeGeneres is mean and cruel to her staff, so stop watching her show. Chrissy Teigen bullied young women online, unfollow her on Instagram and Twitter. Stop buying her products and let the retailers who sell them know. Disney refuses to film in Georgia because the state doesn't tolerate murdering unborn babies, but films in portions of the world where there's still modern-day slavery occurring. I mean, just stop watching the theatrical releases. Stop buying their Blu-rays, unsubscribe to their streaming services, and refuse to buy your kids their toys. If you're thinking to yourself, will this really work? Or how effective can this be? Let's take a moment and reminisce. Mel Gibson has been a star in many of our homes for decades, and is known for captivating movies like Braveheart, The Patriot, and Lethal Weapon. Gibson hit his height of fame around 2004 with the release of the highly anticipated movie The Passion of the Christ, which he co-wrote and directed. A couple years later, a drunken Gibson is pulled over and makes some anti-Semitic statements. Immediately, people began using their power as a consumer to fight back. People stopped buying his films and condemned his behavior. Companies refused to work with him, and even after apologies, it would take years for Gibson to make any sort of recovery in the entertainment industry. See, this is where capitalism finds superiority in cancel culture. It allows for redemption, it allows for people to make amends when they are truly innocent, when the truly innocent are targeted. It comes to their defense. Cancel culture is permanent. There is no recovery, and that is not only dangerous, but goes against the character that God calls us to operate in. Ezekiel 33:11 says this, "Say to them, as surely as I live, declares the Lord God, I take no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but rather that the wicked should turn from their ways and live. Turn from your evil ways, for why should you die, O house of Israel?" It is God's desire that we are all saved and turn away from our sin. That is God's mercy in play, a mercy that we should be willing to bestow on others. Now, this does not mean people should go without consequences, but that after, they should receive the opportunity to make amends. So, rather than eliminating the opposition and the opposing opinion, counter it with facts that support your position. Instead of threatening to harm someone who has done wrong, stop supporting them. Instead of erasing people who do things that we don't like, set the example of how to live and let your life influence those around you. Cancel culture, you have overstayed your welcome, and don't let door hit you where the good Lord split you. And now you know my opinion. What's your take? Let me know in the comments below. So, the reason why I decided to bring up cancel culture was because New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is a perfect example of why the cancel culture has failed as an idea. Governor Cuomo has found himself in hot water yet again for sexual misconduct. Now, this was something that we were made aware about in the beginning of January, and it's now resurfaced with New York Attorney General Letitia James concluding her private, unbiased investigation. Now, keep in mind, this was just a civil case. This case amounted to about 168 pages with over 70,000 pieces of evidence and corroboration of the sexual misconduct against at least 11 women, and one of them being a police officer.
The independent investigation has concluded that Governor Andrew Cuomo sexually harassed multiple women, and in doing so violated federal and state law. Specifically, the investigation found that Governor Andrew Cuomo sexually harassed current and former New York State employees by engaging in unwelcome and non-consensual touching and making numerous offensive comments of a suggestive and sexual nature that created a hostile work environment for women. Over the course of the 5-month investigation, the investigators spoke to 179 individuals. They reviewed more than 74,000 pieces of evidence, including documents, emails, texts, audio files, and pictures. These interviews and pieces of evidence reveal a deeply disturbing yet clear picture. Governor Cuomo sexually harassed current and former state employees in violation of both federal and state laws.
It's important to note that the Attorney General does not recommend or does not give an opinion on whether or not it should be pursued in a criminal investigation. Should a criminal investigation should be pursued. Now, she does not have the power to charge Governor Cuomo criminally, but she definitely does have the power, and it's typically her duty to recommend whether or not there should be criminal charges. By her opting not to do this is definitely a political move here. Typically, the Attorney General of a state tends to, if they want to move up, the next spot up would be the governor. And Letitia James has made her motives clear that she's going after that gubernatorial position. And it's definitely a political strategy to make sure that she is clean as a whistle politically. Because I guess one could say that if she did come out and recommend fully that there be a criminal investigation, that it would be politically driven. So she's trying to play it clear and safe, but it's kind of in a catch-22. She's making her political motives obvious by not recommending, but then again, she would if she was recommending. So she finds herself in a sticky situation, but nonetheless, this civil case, again, amounted to over 70,000 pieces of evidence. That's a lot of evidence. Only against 11 women, that's a lot, but that's a lot of pieces of evidence for only 11 people. So, it's pretty clear that Governor Cuomo actually did do this sexual misconduct, and it's pretty clear that he should be charged criminally. Now, I know there's statute of limitations in New York when it comes to this kind of stuff, so obviously that will need to be investigated. We don't know when this misconduct occurred, but we do know it occurred while he was governor. So that is a little different than even something like Kavanaugh or Trump, when those accusations came before that they were in that position. So calling for impeachment on Trump because you already knew an accusation before he was elected, that's kind of moot. That kind of defeats the purpose. And plus, corroboration is a big part of this. There is no corroborative evidence against Brett Kavanaugh, and yet people still to this day are calling for impeachment. People are saying that Kavanaugh should be in jail because you have to believe all women. And yes, we should take allegations seriously, but corroboration is a big part of this. And with over 70,000 pieces of evidence, I'm sorry, Governor Cuomo, it doesn't look good for you. And many Democrats know it doesn't look good for Cuomo, and they're calling for his resignation. But it's important to know the language that they're using. They're saying resignation, which is a voluntary action. So what's the takeaway? What am I trying to say? Well, everybody knows that Governor Cuomo is not going to just resign. He's not just going to give up his seat. He's going to try to ride it out. So by Democrats using this language, they kind of put the ball in Governor Cuomo's court. They kind of say, I'm clean of this. I said that he should resign. So I'm clean. I'm steering clear from this. But people can see right through that. No, people need to be calling for his impeachment. Even the President of the United States, when he was asked about impeachment, he dodged the question.
Back in March, you said that if the investigation confirmed the allegations against Governor Cuomo, then he should resign. So will you now call on him to resign, given the investigator said the 11 women were credible?
I stand by that statement.
Are you now calling on him to resign?
Yes.
And if he doesn't resign, do you believe he should be impeached and removed from office?
Let's take one thing at a time here. I think he should resign.
Let's take one thing at a time. You just acknowledged that all 11 women are credible. And you're saying that, oh, we should just take it one step at a time here. I'm sorry, but if even one person is credible, then you should not be in a governmental position. I mean, it just because the person is pushing the agenda that you want does not take precedent, or is not more important than the law. Governor Cuomo has been proven to break the law. And we know that Governor Cuomo, this is not the first time he's done this. This is not the first time he's broken the law. I mean, just go back to COVID. It's been proven that him and his staffers fudged numbers of COVID deaths and made it seem like the elder weren't dying in nursing homes. Oh, if they died in the hospital, that means they didn't die in the nurse, and they didn't die from getting it in the nursing home. He was purposely making it seem like it was better than it was. And that goes along with his response. His response is just disgusting. It's asinine. His response is that, oh, I do this on a regular basis for everybody.
First, I want you to know directly from me that I never touched anyone inappropriately or made inappropriate sexual advances. I am 63 years old. I've lived my entire adult life in public view. That is just not who I am, and that's not who I have ever been. I've been making the same gesture in public all my life. Indeed, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of photos of me using the exact same gesture. I do it with everyone, black and white, young and old, straight and LGBTQ, powerful people, friends, strangers, people who I meet on the street.
I'm sorry, to try to justify your touching by more touching. I mean, it's almost comedic. I mean, you have to laugh at it, because if not, then you'll cry. But the truth is that Cuomo is not going to give up his seat voluntarily. And there needs to be action. There needs to be an impeachment. There needs to be force of removal from his position. And it seems like the only Democrat that's smart enough to acknowledge this is, believe it or not, the mayor Bill de Blasio from New York City.
The whole thing has been so painful. When you read this report, 11 women systematically wronged, and he harassed them, he assaulted them in several cases. It's not even close. And then he has the audacity to say, oh, I like to hug people. I mean, that's just out of touch with reality, but it's also profoundly disrespectful. Putting your hand up a woman's shirt and touching their breast is not generational. I know plenty of guys who are older who would never in a million years do that. Talking to 20-something-year-old women, asking them if they date an older guy, and then leering at them. And this is not acceptable behavior. It's not even close. I absolutely believe he must resign for the good of New York State and our people. If he wants to wait for impeachment, he can, but it's coming soon in our state legislature.
Should he be charged criminally?
It looks like it. I mean,
Should he be?
Yeah. If you assault a woman, if you do something against her will sexually, that's criminal. And the Albany County District Attorney is looking at that, and I think he should be charged.
Kaylee and Leo on Fox News on Wednesday had a perfect response to Cuomo and showed the hypocrisy of the Democratic Party.
Now, Leo, I'd like to start with you on this. The governor's defiance is in stark contrast to how he said back in 2018 that sexual assault allegations should be handled during the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings. Let's take a look and then get your thoughts on the other side.
There is a disrespect for women that this administration chronically exemplifies. After the Me Too movement, they did absolutely nothing when it came to sexual harassment. To cheapen or ridicule the pain a woman suffers from a sexual attack is disgusting. Sexist and disgusting.
I'll tell you right now, this is really embarrassing. You know, again, it's a classic example of rules for thee, but not for me. There was no evidence against Kavanaugh. There was nothing, and yet you have Cuomo out there pretending to be the white knight. There is overwhelming evidence for that district attorney right now to charge Governor Cuomo. That's the political game. And the Democratic legislature in New York, shame on them. You're telling me they didn't have this information? They could have done the same investigation? This is the ugliest nature of politics and Democratic loyalty, because this political track is slowing down the legal track.
Leo's exactly right. This is a political game. You're hearing the words resign, resign, resign. You're not, for the most part, certainly from the national Democrats, hearing impeach, impeach, impeach. Now, why is that? They know he's not going to resign. They know he's here to stay. They know Cuomo has ambitions to run yet again for governor. But by saying impeach, that takes it to the next level. That demands action. That's out of Cuomo's hands. That's in the hands of Democrats. Notice what they're doing. They're saying resign because they know he won't resign. They will not say impeach. You have half of state lawmakers who have said resign now in the state of New York. How many of them will turn that resignation call into an impeachment one? That is the real story.
Kaylee and Leo are exactly right here. They show how crooked the Democrat Party is. They're quick to cancel Kavanaugh with no corroboration, with no evidence. But when it comes to Cuomo, when the evidence is overwhelming, when it's time that he needs to give up his seat, the Democrats are hesitant. They want to wait. They want to see what happens. They want to take it one step at a time. I'm sorry, but this hypocrisy, enough is enough. Cuomo, you have overstayed your welcome, and it's time you get out of your seat and you answer for what you've done. Governor Ron DeSantis, however, is here to stay. The governor of Florida recently issued an executive order in late July that bans mask mandates in public schools. Of course, there has been some pushback by the media and the president. Here's Sleepy Joe attempting to respond to this policy.
What are we doing? COVID-19 is a national challenge, and it must come together. We have to come together, all of us together, as a country to solve it. Make no mistake, the escalation of cases is particularly concentrated in states with low vaccination rates. Just 2 states, Florida and Texas, account for 1/3 of all new COVID-19 cases in the entire country. Just 2 states. Look, we need leadership from everyone. If some governors aren't willing to do the right thing to beat this pandemic, then they should allow businesses and universities who want to do the right thing to be able to do it. I say to these governors, please help. But if you aren't going to help, at least get out of the way of the people who are trying to do the right thing.
What? I just want to take a moment and explain how ridiculous and dishonest this is. It's absolutely bananas to suggest that forcing people to wear masks is the right thing. Think about that. Because DeSantis wants to prove your right to choose, he's doing the wrong thing. No, the right thing is to force your 4-year-old to wear a mask. By the way, there's not one piece of data to support that isn't even that even works. So get out of here with that. Crackpots like Fauci and his posse wonder why people aren't listening. It's because of stupid statements like this. And the fact that Biden is hiding behind the daily case count to justify it. The president points out that a third of the new COVID cases are in Texas and Florida. Has anybody asked themselves why? Well, it's certainly not because of a policy that has no effect until the school year starts. No, it's definitely not that. COVID can't just travel through time and punish you for making a decision that will affect your future. Wouldn't that be something? I wonder how that would work. I think I'm going to have a pizza this weekend. Uh-oh. I feel some acid reflux from making that decision. I mean, that's how ridiculous it is, right? Maybe Biden thinks that's possible. I'm not going to make any assumptions here. On a serious note, though, the COVID propaganda machine has lost all credibility. All the so-called experts are off their rockers. They've fallen off the wagon, and they've had a few letters missing in the alphabet soup for some time. The NIH director, Francis Collins, was on CNN Tuesday morning and suggested that parents need to mask up in the home.
Well, so, yeah, you do need to think about it. And that's the reason why the recommendations are for kids under 12, that they avoid being in places where they might get infected, which means recommendations of mask wearing in schools, and that at home, parents of unvaccinated kids should be thoughtful about this. And the recommendation is to wear masks there as well.
Let me just follow up on that.
I know that's uncomfortable. I know it seems weird, but it is the best way to protect your kids.
Wow. Straight Looney Tunes. So far from reality. Far, far away. Different galaxy. Alternate universe. What is this? Even Collins himself tried to walk it back in a tweet. He said, quote, "Let me clarify the masking message that I garbled on New Day this morning. Vaccinated parents who live in communities with high COVID transmission rates should mask when out in public indoor settings to minimize risks to their unvaccinated kids. No need to mask at home." Nice try, Mr. Collins, but this tweet still makes no logical sense. He's suggesting that vaccinated parents need to mask up out in public anytime they're indoors to protect their unvaccinated kids. But now you decided that you goofed up. There's no need to mask up in the home, which is also indoors, to protect your unvaccinated kids? Does his home have some super COVID stopper 3000 that I don't know about? How does this make any sense? And this guy is the director of the nation's medical research agency. That's some scary stuff. But it doesn't stop there. Now we got Dr. Leana Wen back on the scene. She's also doing a bang-up job by just blaming everyone who isn't vaccinated.
The issue is not with the vaccinated. The issue is with the unvaccinated. The reason why we're having to go back to mask mandates indoors is that the unvaccinated didn't abide by the honor system. The honor code didn't work. And so the reason we're doing this now is we want to protect the unvaccinated from spreading to one another. That's why if there's no proof of vaccination, if there are vaccinated and unvaccinated people mixing in indoor spaces, that's why we need mask requirements. In addition, there are some individuals who may be living at home who even if they're vaccinated themselves, may be living at home with unvaccinated family members or immunocompromised family members. Those individuals should take additional precautions. The issue is with the unvaccinated spreading to one another, not with the vaccinated.
All you evil people who decided not to pump your blood with a vaccine that's not FDA approved. It's all your fault. You're the reason why the vaccinated have to wear masks. Yes. Let's split the country more. Only good things can come of this. Or you can just let people make the decision themselves. I'm sorry, but it's not the responsibility of the vaccinated to protect the unvaccinated. Those who are unvaccinated have made a conscious decision. They made the decision not to be vaccinated. I don't know a person, not one single person, who is unvaccinated and expects those who are vaccinated to take precautions and mask up around them. No, the unvaccinated don't expect the vaccinated to go out of their way. The unvaccinated purposely made that decision knowing that they could be exposed to the virus. The fact is, pre-pandemic, Nobody knew Dr. Leanna Wang. Nobody had heard of Francis Collins. These people were unimportant. And if COVID phases out of the media, they will as well. They want to be in the spotlight. They like the spotlight. They love the spotlight. They feel nice and warm and important in the spotlight. And they are doing all they can to stay there, even if it costs you your freedoms. So how about we go back to the data? Stick to the data and you sound smart. The real reason that COVID is spiking so much in the South is because of the climate. The science has showed us this very early on in the pandemic. COVID is an airborne virus. We've known about this for quite some time. Cases tend to correlate very closely with the weather. Right now, places like Texas and Florida, it's 1,002 degrees. It's too hot for people to be outside. So what happens? People go inside where there's air conditioning. And what happens inside? When people are in a contained area, the virus spreads. The same is true in other parts of the country at different times of the year. The data proves this very clearly. If we look at some charts directly from the CDC, they show us how case count directly correlates with the climate. So we have two comparisons here. Let's take New York and Florida as an example. Here's a chart from the CDC of New York. And we can see right in the beginning of the pandemic, right in March, there was a huge spike, uptick, because what is the weather like in New York in March and April? It's still cold. Yes, I know. I live here. Believe it. It's still cold here. Even in May, it's cold. You can see that spike, it just shoots way up. And it stays there until about June. And then, it steadily decreases and then kind of plateaus in June. And that is when people go outside. And you can see all summer long, this is before the vaccine, all summer long, the case count was at a minimum. And then once winter hit, once October hit, November, December, it's starting to get cold. It's negative 3,000 degrees outside, and it shot back up. And then that peak is when everybody peaked. That's when everybody peaked. Everybody got a big surge in January of this year. And you probably wouldn't have known that because of unless you were paying attention to the data, you probably wouldn't have known that because everybody was talking about the election. Everybody was talking about supposed election fraud, allegedly election fraud. Everybody was talking about Trump. Everybody was talking about Biden and all that stuff. That was the main cycle in the media. But it was literally the height of the pandemic. If you look at any chart was the height of the pandemic was in January, February of this year in terms of case count. So let's take a look at the Florida chart. The Florida chart shows that, look, early in the pandemic in April, it looks almost identical to New York in June, July, and August. April, people are outside in Florida. Man, the weather's beautiful. And then what happens in the summer? July, August, woo, it's super hot. Get your shorts, get your Speedos out. It's super hot. And that's when the case count began to rise. And then toward September, October, it decreased. And then they got that usual spike in January. And then if you look at after January, it immediately began to plateau and go down. I mean, there was a little bit of a spike, and then after the winter and getting into the spring months, it goes down, and then you see it coming back up in the summer because, again, super hot. So as you can see, the data shows that COVID cases correlate very closely to the weather. You're going to see a spike in the north and in the Midwest come this winter. This winter in Florida, guarantee you it's going to plateau again. But cases are going to spike in New York. The important thing, though, is that we shouldn't be so heavily focused on case count because now we have a huge disconnect with hospitalizations and death rates. In the beginning of the pandemic, last year, even in January this year, as case counts went up, so did the deaths. and the deaths were going at a higher rate. But now, if you look at the deaths, places like San Francisco, look at San Francisco, the 7-day rolling average as of a couple weeks ago was 0, and they have a higher case count than they did a few months ago because of the summer months, because of the climate. People are inside with air conditioning, similar to Texas and Florida, and even though their case count is going up, their 7-day rolling average was 0. And that's a totally different ballgame. That's a totally different story of a different time in the pandemic, pre-vaccination. So it seems that the unvaccinated and the vaccinated can live in harmony. But the problem is that we keep pushing this 2-tier system. And that's only going to have a negative effect. When you have people who are required to get the vaccine to go into a business, then people who are unvaccinated are just going to have to end up being with other unvaccinated people, and the virus is going to spread more easily amongst the unvaccinated. This is just the science. But the unvaccinated are willing to take that risk. That's why they are unvaccinated. If we just look at the data makes you sound smart. Ron DeSantis had a perfect response to the president's shameful rebuke.
Joe Biden suggests that if you don't do lockdown policies, then you should, quote, get out of the way. But let me tell you this. If you're coming after the rights of parents in Florida, I'm standing in your way. I'm not going to let you get away with it. If you're trying to deny kids a proper in-person education, I'm going to stand in your way, and I'm going to stand up for the kids in Florida. If you're trying to restrict people, impose mandates, if you're trying to ruin their jobs and their livelihoods and their small business, if you are trying to lock people down, I am standing in your way, and I'm standing for the people of Florida. So why don't you do your job? Why don't you get this border secure? And until you do that, I don't want to hear a blip about COVID from you. Thank you.
Oh, man, the carnage. Putting policy aside for a second, who do you think makes a better leader here? The guy who can barely stay awake? Or the guy that gets an amen from the crowd? Ron DeSantis shames the president. And it's great to see that governors are taking a stand to protect their people from a tyrannical federal government. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio has now made it a requirement to be fully vaccinated in order to go into businesses such as restaurants, hospitality, and gyms. He thinks that through incentives and mandates that they can curb COVID once and for all.
So today I announce a new approach, which we're calling the Key to NYC Pass. The key to New York City. When you hear those words, I want you to imagine the notion that because someone's vaccinated, they can do all the amazing things that are available in this city. All that's going to open up to you. You'll have the key, you can open the door. But if you're unvaccinated, unfortunately, you will not be able to participate in many things. That's the point we're trying to get across. It's time for people to see vaccination as literally necessary to living a good and full and healthy life.
Again, these mandates are contrary to the science. If you start requiring businesses to only allow the fully vaccinated, it's going to separate the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. The vaccinated are going to congregate together, and the vaccinated are going to congregate together. And the more unvaccinated people you have together, the more the virus is going to start spreading at an exponential rate. It's proven that the vaccine spreads higher amongst the unvaccinated. But like I said, the unvaccinated, they know this. They know that risk, and they choose to be unvaccinated. I'm sorry, but it doesn't hurt a vaccinated person when they're with an unvaccinated person. They've done all that they could do to protect themselves, and it doesn't matter whether or not they're in contact with someone who's unvaccinated. The person who's more at risk is the person who chose not to be vaccinated, but they knew that. They made that risk. So the fact that you're pushing people to get these vaccines between these incentives and mandates, it's not going to reach your goal of zero COVID. And that's the thing, is that these Democrats, they want zero COVID. They've set the bar to zero COVID. COVID gone forever. And that's so unrealistic. The more we realize that COVID is here to stay, the more we can get on with our lives. The faster that we can get COVID out of the media, the more we can go back to living, and the more that we can boost this economy and get back to where we were. This week on For the Entertainment, Scarlett Johansson has filed a lawsuit against Disney for breach of contract. Disney stated in a contract with Johansson for her role in Black Widow that the film was to be treated like any other Marvel film, specifically in regards to the release of the film. The contract states that the movie, if released, would have a traditional wide theatrical release. Instead, Disney made the movie available on Disney Plus Premiere while simultaneously releasing it in theaters. This strategy cuts against the box office profits, largely causing Scarlett Johansson to lose out on royalties. The opening weekend for Black Widow was around $80 million, which isn't something to scoff at. However, the following weekend, Black Widow took an 80% hit in the box office. This significant decrease could be attributed to the film also being available to stream. You may think to yourself, a wide theatrical release? That doesn't seem very specific. What's the breach? Well, Disney has allegedly breached the contract on two fronts related to the release of Black Widow. Nate the Lawyer on YouTube explains the two terms in contract law that pertain to this lawsuit. Those two terms being trade usage and course of dealings. I will link his video in the description below. But broadly speaking, the reason for the lawsuit is Disney did not abide with the trade usage of a wide theatrical release by deciding to also release the film on their streaming platform. Disney also failed to abide to the course of dealings that was established in the previous contracts with the actress. Again, Nate the Lawyer does a great job explaining the technical terms in his video. Do you think Scarlett Johansson has a case? Let me know in the comments. I think this is an example of how Disney has gotten too big. Disney is one of, if not the largest corporation in the entertainment industry. And it's not about the monetary value of Disney, it's about the influence. The executives at Disney think they have reached some sort of untouchable status. Their response to the lawsuit proves just that. New York Times reporter Brooks Barnes tweeted out the response. He says, Disney gives a no merit whatsoever response to Johansson's pay lawsuit and calls it sad and distressing in its callous disregard for the horrific and prolonged global effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Disney continued, Disney has fully complied with Mrs. Johansson's contract, and furthermore, the release of Black Widow on Disney Plus with Premier Access has significantly enhanced her ability to earn additional compensation on top of the $20 million that she has received to date. It's pompous and ironic to accuse Scarlett Johansson that she's disregarding the impact of COVID by suing Disney. It's hilarious that Disney thinks anyone cares about how COVID has affected the company. Disney's assets total over $200 billion. And while Disney's revenue did take a little bit of a hit in 2020, the value of the company's assets actually increased. So to say that an actress wants consequences for a breach of contract is callous, you would have to think you're untouchable. And that's just it. They don't care about breaching contracts. They will just pay Scarlett Johansson money for all of this to just go away. Now, does that make it right? Of course not. But this mentality in time will start to hurt their wallets. The untouchable mindset at Disney is slowly infiltrating the content that they create. In my opinion, there has not been a quality Disney Marvel film since Avengers Infinity War. And the last and possibly only good TV series from the MCU is WandaVision. If it's not woke propaganda, it's the mainstream mass-produced formula that makes an undesirable product. It all stems from the idea that it doesn't matter what it is. If it's Disney, they'll watch it. And thanks to the consumer, they're right. Avengers Endgame was not a great film, an opinion shared by many, but that didn't hurt the film much. However, this formula is not sustainable. Eventually, it will come back to bite Disney. It even goes beyond the Marvel Cinematic Universe. As awesome as The Mandalorian is, I think Season 2 suffered partially because of the culture that has become the norm at Disney. It affected the Star Wars trilogy, spilled over into animation. The art is being polluted. The best thing you can do as a consumer is cut your ties monetarily to Disney. One of the best things about capitalism is you, the consumer. You control the quality of the product you consume. I'm not in favor of boycotting Disney. I don't usually think that boycotts are very productive. But instead, I'm encouraging you to use the power you have as a consumer. Don't just go see the next Disney movie in theaters because your friends want to go. Don't continue to pay monthly for Disney Plus because there's a new season of your favorite show slated for next year. If there's content that I want to watch on Disney Plus, I use a family member's account. If there's a new Disney movie that I want to see, I wait for it to be released digitally or on Blu-ray. If you want to force Disney to change, I suggest you do the same. Also this week on For the Entertainment, drummer Pete Parada from the band Offspring has been kicked out of the group for not getting the COVID vaccine. Parada posted this on Instagram. He says, "Since I am unable to comply with what is increasingly becoming an industry mandate, it has recently been decided that I am unsafe to be around in the studio and on tour. I mention this because you won't be seeing me at these upcoming shows." Parada opted to not get the vaccine because he has GBS and his doctor recommended he not get it at this time. Is Pete's doctor now responsible for killing people? Remember, it was Biden who blamed Facebook for people dying because they didn't censor misinformation. It wouldn't surprise me one bit for people to start blaming physicians that give sound, reasonable medical advice. Parada is the latest victim to cancel culture. His 15 career with the band abruptly ended thanks to the pressures Americans face to get the COVID vaccine. It's sad that we have allowed our culture to get to this point. People have to give up their passions, their careers, all because of the top-down control. And that's what it is. This is the road we have chosen. Eventually, the American dream will be a story we tell our grandchildren. But we can turn it around. There's hope, and it starts with people like you. If you're still watching or listening, that means you made it to the end of this week's episode of For the Republic. I hope since you've listened to my rambling that it wasn't all that bad, maybe even somewhat enjoyable. And maybe you already gave the video a thumbs up, but if you haven't, what are you waiting for? You can help grow the community by commenting below and sharing this episode. Follow For the Republic on social media to get the latest updates. A new episode will premiere right here on YouTube next Sunday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. For now, be blessed and Godspeed.